shame is a very powerful thing, right? Um, and when we feel shame, we're tempted to hide. So our federal government, right, has a data point that 90% of folks with substance use disorder will never even seek support. 10% who do wait on average 10 years. For those 10% who do seek help, is shame preventing them from being fully transparent?
Welcome, everyone, to the One Moment Podcast. I'm your boy and your co-host, Kevin Odom. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a certified clinical supervisor, and a licensed clinical addiction specialist, all in the state of North Carolina. Now, we have a very phenomenal guest on today's show, and this young lady is very intelligent. We got connected on social media and I love the energy, I love the spirit, and I love the passion that she brings to the field of mental health, substance use, and suicide prevention, and just recovery in general, right? Like she is an absolute bombshell of a young lady to have on here, and I'm looking forward to this. I was just in a conversation with her and just intrigued by her knowledge and her experience thus far. And I don't want to spoil it, but Miss Crystal Fedeli, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? And thank you so much. That was such a kind intro.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I am doing well. And uh, talking to you prior to this show, I am just baffled. Like just straight baffled. A researcher and many other credentials behind your name. So here on here on our show, we're all about breaking stigmas. We're all about breaking barriers, making changes where change needs to be made. So let's jump straight into it then, right?
Let's do it.
What do you feel like is the most critical thing that needs to be changed in the field, right? Or the most critical gap as it relates to mental health, substance use? What is it that you feel like needs to be focused on heavily?
My gosh, where do I even start? I think that first and foremost, we need to make it shame-free.
Shame-free.
Yes.
When I think of shame-free, I think of not being afraid to talk about things, not being
Mm.
afraid to walk in the mud with people. That's what comes to
Mm.
my mind as a therapist. And you're coming from a research perspective. So help me understand like the shame-free approach.
Yeah. Well, shame is a very powerful thing, right? Um, and when we feel shame, we're tempted to hide, right? Like literally to hide behind whatever. Um, and it's really sad because, and you would know this in your practice, like if somebody's, what does that look like when you're seeking recovery for trauma or for substance use or whatever have you? Well, first of all, you're not even seeking the help, right? The data tells us it's a data point from the NIAAA, so our federal government, right, has a data point that 90% of folks with substance use disorder will never even seek support. And the 10% who do wait on average 10 years. And that's a lot of people, right? If we can think about, these are people who are parents, friends, coworkers, right? Like just the humanity of it. And just think of it like 9 out of 10 people that you know who struggle with substance use will never even seek help. Only 1 out of those 10 that you know, and we all know somebody or somebodies, only 1 out of 10 will seek help, and they'll wait on average 10 years before they seek that help. Why? Well, I would argue that it's largely because of shame. And then, secondly, for those 10% who do seek help, is shame preventing them from being fully transparent? And, especially alcohol recovery, which is really the specific substance that, I have my expertise in and that I work in. Um, it's a very shaming thing. Like, you are shamed. And why? Well, it's because, unfortunately, the consequences of having alcohol addiction, um, it's very shameful stuff. I mean, when somebody has their prefrontal cortex inhibited, they they are, doing some pretty wild things, right? And so what do? You feel shame. I mean, I remember personally when I was 10 years into suffering from alcohol addiction, I would wake up the morning after just like, I would just be sleeping and I'd wake up like, like, and instantly the shame would hit me and I'd be like, oh my God, what did I say or do the night before? Like, I'd be frantic, and because I felt so shameful for what I did or said, and so embarrassed. And for me, I had so much childhood trauma that I always use the analogy of like a champagne bottle, ironically speaking, right? But like popping the cork off of a champagne bottle, and that's what the alcohol did. And my childhood trauma went spraying on everyone like around me. And it was so shameful because I did and said things that I had such shame for. But anyway, so when we talk about alcohol recovery and even trauma recovery, but it's just, shame causes people to hide. And from a scientific perspective, it's not your fault if you have alcohol dependency, but the problem is people don't know this at a large scale. Um, so it doesn't really even like make sense to shame it. So, but I understand why, because people don't know the science behind it. And the opinions and the tradition, the way we've always done it, have had, it's a really strong thing to say, but a chokehold on the recovery system. And so I understand why. It's just the zeitgeist of our age, the wisdom of our age, the way people think about, alcohol addiction and recovery. um but if and when you want me to share what I've learned from the science, I certainly can explain like what actually causes alcohol dependency. um, but it really is not somebody's fault. So there's no reason to shame people. It's actually tragic. It's actually really sad. But I also understand that, again, the things that people engage in when they are super drunk are pretty bad things. And so that's why my whole thing is just like, can we look at the science so we can actually help people recover? Because I bet you that they feel just as bad for what they've done or said, even if they don't say anything. So yeah, that's my answer.
No, and I do appreciate it. And I think you shared that 90% of people who suffer from substance use disorders do not seek help, while 10% do. Now, here's an interesting fact, right? Because you're talking about people of seeking help, right?
Mhm.
According to a 2024 Gallup poll, 56% of U.S. healthcare quality was rated as only fair or poor.
Mm.
Another research study shows that over 75% of Americans do not believe they are receiving the healthcare they deserve. In 2024, West Health Gallup showed that only 49% cannot access or afford quality care. Harris Poll 2023, 70 plus percent feel the system fails them. Ipsos or MDVIP, 61% say the system is not in the patient's best interest. And last but not least, according to the APNORC, 78% are concerned about accessing quality care. And that's not the 90%. We're talking about that 10%, right? And those numbers right there, like that is even more devastating, because if that's happening to that 10%, no wonder the other 90% isn't seeking help. And that's just getting on the surface level of the research of the stats here. And when you look at shame, there's so many different ways to be shamed, right? Into receiving services. I've met so many providers and so many therapists that will literally say to a patient who's on MAT, and they are just so negative to a person who's on MAT. And that's just one example. There's so many more. People create what is called internalized guilt in that individual who's trying to seek help, or who is seeking help. There's just cultural and gender norms that goes into it, past negative experiences, and I can even speak on that personally on myself. So, what are your thoughts, as far as like, what besides all of this, what else do you feel like leads to shaming individuals in this shameful environment? And of course, I do want to get into some of the science of substance use too.
Yeah, no, like tearing up as you're reading that all off because it just brings me back to my personal experience and what fueled my entire passion to do this, which is good because I was actually literally earlier. I know, like, we're not talking about faith, but I was like, I struggle sometimes with the admin part of my, business. I'm an ADHD person, so and so you know, the consistency sometimes bogs me down, and I'm just like, God, I need you to like reignite my passion. And so I guess I'm getting my prayer answered right now. Anyways, so I usually don't cry when I talk about this, but no, m- you know, um, I know you asked me a question, but can I specifically comment to when somebody is seeking MAT, medication assisted treatment, for example? Do you mind if I just speak to that before I
Go
actually
ahead.
answer your question? Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure, like, I'm answering your question and not running my own agenda here, but because this is your podcast. But no, I just remember, so medication assisted treatment is an evidence-based tool that I'm super passionate about. I certainly educate on it, excuse me, in my practice. Medication assisted treatment, MAT education, is a huge thing I am a proponent of. And it was one of the evidence-based tools that was pivotal for me. It wasn't like the only thing, right? But it was a turning point for me. And so the traditional system wasn't working for me, no matter what I did, how hard I tried, for nearly 10 years. And I tried so hard and it just wasn't working. Um, and so part of what I discovered when I discovered, oh, there's a whole science to this, right? And science is just, the study of how things work the way they do and why things work the way they do. And so when I learned that there's actually a science to, alcohol dependency and recovery, one of the things that I came across was medication assisted treatment, MAT. And so I'm like, oh, okay, let me, try this out. Right. So I set out to try it out. And so I went to a doctor and they heard everything I had to say. I'm like, listen, look, right? I've been trying, support groups such as AA, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery. I've been going to therapy to try to work on my trauma. And boy, did I have childhood trauma. I have a 9 out of 10 ACE score, adverse childhood experience score. So name a trauma, I probably got it. And I had been going to, doctors like psychiatrists or whatever, the front of church for after service for prayer, praying on my own and begging God for the answer, and for nearly 10 years at this point. And I'm like, nothing's working for me. I came across that you could use medication for something like this. And so I'd like to give this a try, right? Because I was a part of that 10% seeking help for nearly 10 years. It didn't take me 10 years to seek help. I was seeking help for nearly 10 years. And nothing was working for me. And I'll just never forget her answer when she said, I just don't think you need medication for something like this. She's like, just keep a drink log. And after you've had a drink or two, just stop. You don't need to drink anymore after that. As if I hadn't told her that I wasn't able to do that. So I'm an advocate, right? And so I, advocate for myself or whoever I'm advocating for, my clients, my husband, my kids, friends, whoever, right? And so I insisted on speaking to somebody higher up in the practice. And so the clinical director of the practice walked in, and she eventually told me that she thought I was trying to go through the back door for treatment. I then went to another doctor, and that doctor told me I was trying to be my own doctor and treat myself. And so I went to a fourth doctor, and they told me eventually just to get out of their office. I guess they didn't appreciate my advocacy. But at the time, I was like a single mom. So this is why I brought this up. Like, well, actually, no, this was earlier in our conversation. So I was a single mom, and as single as a single mother could be. My daughter's father told me that if I went through with my pregnancy, I'd be on my own. And so I went through with my pregnancy and I was on my own. And the childhood trauma thing, you remember that? So I had no family whatsoever, no family, completely discarded by my family on both sides, and, very unfortunate, and, so I literally had, like, nowhere to go, and I just like, when you have, like, kids, I don't know if, like, you have kids or any of your listeners probably some of them probably have kids or maybe a lot of them, I don't know, but, like, you just, like, your kids are perfect, and you're just so aware of, like, your shortcomings, and you just want the world for them, and I was like I am, like, my daughter deserves better. Like, she deserves a mom who doesn't have, like, this alcohol addiction and, someone who's had so much trauma, like, and I was trying so hard to get better, and it just wasn't working, and I just, and so it's like, these doctors, like, sent me away with my kid, like, denying me treatment, and away with my kid, and I just and it's like there was no answer for me and nobody was helping me and, anyways, it just was really luckily no harm ever came to my daughter, but in my state of New Jersey, I ironically, at the time was working for the Department of Children and Families Division of Child Protection and Permanency in the litigation unit, writing up all the litigation for when we went to court. And most of the time it was to protect children from families who either poverty was the biggest case that I came across or substance use. And so here I am writing up this litigation at work when I'm like hungover from the night before, And so, anyways, I just, felt like, so bad for her. And luckily, no harm ever came to her. But it certainly could have, and, it's by the grace of God, and, so anyways, so I kept going, I kept researching, and I finally found a doctor who would prescribe me medication. Unfortunately, he didn't take health insurance, so I had to, like, pay out of pocket for it, and I was a single mom, so it was rough, so I had to, like, kinda take from my rent money, but I did what I had to do, and I eventually caught up with my rent, but, um and so yeah, I got the medication prescribed to me, and it was kinda just like, "All right, see ya." I was on my own, and I had to figure it out on my own, and, but I did. In 2 to 3 months, I finally recovered after 10 years of not being able to, and I became a normal drinker. Now, eventually, that specific medication stopped working for me, and so I had to kinda learn the list of medications because there's a ton of different medications. I would say a ton, right? And there's different ways to use the medications too, depending on what outcome you want to achieve. Do you want to be sober, but without the strong and obsessive thoughts and cravings for alcohol all day, every day? Or do you want to actually become a moderate drinker? Like there's, the ability to do that if you use a specific medication a specific way. Um, and then I really had to eventually learn how to walk this thing out like shame free, which was really what finally gave me the recovery that I have now. Because again, shame causes you to hide and to not seek help. And unfortunately, the system will shame you as you just, described when you were, just before when you were asking me the question that hopefully I'm getting to answering right now, after I uh, shared all of that with you. But, you know, and also, shame causes you to hold back. And so even unfortunately, I still have to encounter the abuse of this. I would call it abuse, quite frankly, of, the system. But I have to remind myself, it says something about them, Crystal, not you. Luckily I have the research background. So, like, I know the science behind it. So it totally ungaslights me. But not everybody knows the research. And then also, incorporating the soul work, right? Because unfortunately, seeking help from the system traumatizes you. It's supposed to not, but it does. But you just listed those data points, and I would maybe sort of, say that, those data points do support that, seeking help from the system is traumatizing. Um, Anyways, they try to take the agency away from you, especially if you have addiction. It's like the medical system already is like, I'm the boss, and I'm going to tell you top down what the treatment protocol is. My doctors, they either hate me or they love me. My midwife, when I delivered my second, she was like, because she saw how I navigated the healthcare professionals. And she's like, I just want to let you know that you're an inspiration and the reason why I do this. But she's a midwife, so she's kind of like alternative, like healthcare. But yeah, my doctors either hate me or love me because I just have a different perspective. I'm like, you're an expert, right? At, medications and dosages and, stuff of that nature. But I'm also an expert here, and I'm actually the one in charge. You're not in charge. I'm in charge. And so I view us as partners. And so I am hiring you through my health insurance, and through my copayment, but I am hiring you to help me make the best decision, right? And so, my doctors either hate me or they love me, either one. But that's okay. Sometimes they're just not a good fit. But yeah, anyways, and so when it comes to addiction, it's just like your autonomy and your agency and really just respect for you as a person is completely stripped of you. Um, so anyways, my point being is that that's why I believe in incorporating like the soul work, because it's a lot of like, and what I mean when I say soul is that we experience emotions, which obviously emotions are composed of two things, right? The thoughts that come up paired with the somatic sensation that comes up in your body, right? Whether that be depending on your trauma response, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So are you getting your heart racing or butterflies in your stomach or your jaws clenched or your head gets like tight and hot and heavy, right? Those are my somatic experiences a lot. Um, and so, and it's because there's something that's, hitting up inside of you that's still unhealed, that's still broken. It's kind of like if you had a broken leg and I bumped against you, you'd be like, oh my God, that hurts so much. Ow, ow, ow. Right. But if you didn't have a broken leg, you'd be like, Crystal, watch where you're going. Like, right. No, you wouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? And so when we have those experiences, like thoughts paired with somatic sensations, we're being triggered because and I always say, like, we don't necessarily believe the thoughts and the feelings. We use them as teachers to use as stepping stones to get back to the original core story, core wound, core experience, whatever have you. And so my point being is that in alcohol recovery, um, this happens a lot because it is so triggering. But it's really, I always teach the people I mentor. Yes, it sucks. What they did sucks. And what an invitation, right? I'm a person of faith, but whether you believe in a person of faith or not, it's really, all the things I bring up when I bring up about faith, I think are good sentiments to carry with you. But I think it's James 1:2. James writes, consider it pure joy when you face difficulties of any kind, because it's an opportunity for you to be on your way to lacking nothing, right? And there's another verse that says, whatever, was meant for your evil, God will use it for good. And so it's like, yeah, it sucks, it hurts, and let's be grateful for that they triggered us, because we're like, oh, there's something inside of me that's unhealed. And if I get this, man, thank you so much for reminding me that I need to heal in that area, but it's a very it's a very, specific thing you have to sort of reframe anyways, so I'm sorry, I just went on and on. I'm so sorry. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you answered it. I was listening, and I'm just intrigued by your experience because there's so many people that have that similar experience. It's interesting because I was on a doing a show, or we were doing a show a couple of weeks ago, and something came up as far as like advocating for yourself, and it's interesting because we're talking about shame free healthcare, shame free recovery, and self advocation. And I remember, uh, even on a personal level, when I was first diagnosed with dysphagia in the fall of 2020, my provider had me go do a barium swallow and then a modified barium swallow. And on one of those, I forget which one, she had me meeting also with a speech pathologist on one of them. And that speech pathologist was in my face, in my ear, just yelling at me, telling me I was full of crap, I was lying, like all of this stuff. Ain't nothing wrong with you, quit lying. Like what? Like, woman, don't you see I'm trying to freaking swallow here? I can't swallow. I'm trying to swallow and this freaking I can't. And so I've had my last two primary care providers and my uh, GI doctor, every one of them has asked me if I want to go see a speech pathologist. No, absolutely not. Screw that. I don't want to go see one.
Yeah.
Uh, but I share that to share this. We all have a right to our own health care to make decisions. And you're right. That doctor works for us. That
Yeah.
agency works for us. Now,
Yeah.
sure, they get, medication decisions and this, that, and the third. And, they're knowledgeable in that. That's what their expertise is. Yeah, at the same time, I like what Carl Rogers said. We're the expert of our own lives. My job is to, walk with that person through the mud and guide them and assist them throughout this process. It's not to give them the solution or give them the solution without having them walk through the mud. I can't do that, right? I have to just walk with them and be with them throughout their journey. And so I think it's important, as you were saying, to really advocate for yourself. Learn how to advocate for yourself. We all have a voice, and I think it's the biggest part of that voice is learning how to use it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. That's so hard to do though when, you have alcohol addiction. Um, because you're just in such a vulnerable, state. So,
yeah. And
yeah.
unfortunately, when people are in that type of vulnerable state, it takes work to even get out of that state. Recovery isn't a 1 day process or 1 step process. I mean, it's a series of steps that we take each day uh, to get into recovery and to even maintain recovery. And so, one of the things that I love is when that light bulb comes on, right? When that light bulb comes on, individuals start to have that voice. They start to find themselves. They start to see themselves. So, what would you say to an individual? I'm curious on this one. Um, what would you say to an individual who is actively in addiction, alcoholism, substance use? What would you say to that person if they're struggling and they don't feel like they have a voice?
Well, I would understand exactly why, they think they don't. You see, the problem is that, I mean, if you go and work with the majority of people who do recovery work, they don't have a voice. It's the truth, and so that's why, I created Shame Free Recovery because we just have a very different approach. but like, I mean, I don't know how worth it would be to, tell someone like, you know, advocate for yourself. I mean, you gotta build the neural pathways to do that. That's just like telling somebody to go, run 5 miles if they have never ran before, right? Um, it's like you've gotta build the stamina, the neural connections. You've gotta, have the right support, the right game plan, but I would tell them, to, like, get support, but, like, make sure you interview the people that you're getting support from or vet them, like, somehow. Like, if they have a business and their front end is, they make content, like, make sure your body feels safe when you listen to them, right? Do you feel, like, peace and at calm and like they get you, or do you feel nervous or triggered or angry or sad or whatever, right? Listen to your body because it has a lot of, wisdom. Um, yeah, but the problem is that I don't have the data point, but most, if not almost about all, people or providers, I mean, that fear is very valid, with their approach. So I would say check out people like it sounds like your practice or, my practice, or I know other people who have practices. I can count them on one hand, who have a alternative approach. It seems like you and me. Um, yeah, I would give them the list of people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, is helping them find and get connected to the qualitative resources that are out there, because we're missing so many qualitative resources. I say this all the time, uh, that Carl Rogers will be turning in his grave, if he hears what this current day approach called person-centered therapy is, or person-centered care is, and it's at NatCon this year when I went to NatCon, the conference in Philadelphia. One of the major themes there was building a system of people and not of compliance, and I so believe in that. I so absolutely second that theme. We've gotten so far away from people, it's not even funny, and I think it's by far past time to get back to people, right? And that's just my thought process. Now, I do want to touch back on something. You
Yeah.
said that people have to build a neuro pathway in order to, or build new neuronal pathways, so they could actually get that voice. What does that look like?
Yeah, in terms of like advocating for yourself.
Or building the neuronal pathways?
Yeah. So, um yeah, it's kinda like, popping the hood to a car, right? When I talk about neural pathways. The brain is a very powerful thing. Our neurochemistry, our brain, it's so fascinating to me though. Like I'm super passionate about talking about it. And yes, the result is, for example, in this case, that you found your voice, that you're advocating for yourself, but we have to do like work underneath the hood to be able to do that. And so yes, like a neural pathway. Um, so whatever like fires together, wires together, right? And so I'm sure you've heard of that before. And so it's like you have to practice, you have to build the neural pathways. Like when you practice something, you're building new neural pathways. Like, okay, like when I am speaking up for myself, okay, boom, neural pathway fired. I'm speaking up for myself. Um, I am doing the right thing. I'm advocating for myself, right? boom, we get neural pathways firing for that, and they're firing together. So they're wiring together. And so I learn, my body learns, my nervous system learns, right? That my subconscious learns, right? That speaking up for myself and having my own voice is a good thing. The problem is that, like, if you're going to get, like, say you practice speaking up for yourself, but you're getting these providers that we were talking about earlier, right? Who are shaming you, who are, I forget everything we specifically said, but, well, I guess in my experience, right, telling me that I'm trying to be my own doctor and treating myself or trying to go through the back door for therapy. I don't know what you would call that, if that's condescending or I don't even know. Gaslighting, I don't even know. But like that's gonna fire with speaking up for myself so that I'm learning subconsciously, my nervous system is learning, right? That speaking up for myself gets me, again, I don't know what we call it, like disrespected, or I don't even know, treated poorly, or right. And so then I'm going to learn to shrink back. Right. And so that's why, with shame free recovery, um, I'm connecting people to providers that aren't going to do those things, actually are on board, with like this approach to recovery of, hey, what are your goals with alcohol? Do you want to be sober without the strong and obsessive thoughts and cravings for alcohol all day, every day? Do you want it to be like effortless and super easy? Like that kind of sobriety I'm talking about, not the, oh, got to take it one day at a time. And, recovery is a daily choice. No, it's freaking not. It's not. I'm sorry. Not if you're using the right tools. It's absolutely not. Not if you know the root cause and you're addressing the root cause. It doesn't have to be that way. Um, and it's a medical condition. It's just like getting contacts or glasses or LASIK, it's anyways, you just got to address the root cause. Um, I lost my or do you want to be like a moderate drinker? These are your two options on the table, right? Which one, resonates with you best and which one can I support, right? And so then you're learning, oh, okay, well, when I seek help and I use my voice, I am honored, I am respected, I am treated as an equal, right? And so, that's part of the soul work that I'm talking about, in shame free recovery. Like, I don't know if I shared this, but here at Shame Free Recovery, like, I believe that, we need to use an approach to recovery that is absolutely shame free, that is rooted in science, and that's rooted in soul. And so, yeah, that's what builds neural pathways is new experiences and over time, right? It takes a while for these neural pathways to build and to be reinforced and reinforced. It all comes down to neural pathways. That's what I try to tell people. Like there's no reason to feel shame for any of this stuff. Like just learn that this is the root cause. Like neurochemistry is a very real thing. And let's implement, the right strategies and tools to address the root cause. And let's just get you freaking recovered, whether it's substance use at large. Again, I'm the supporting with the alcohol. That's my subject matter expertise. But really it is substance use disorder at large and trauma. Let's just address it. If we don't address it, yeah, it's nasty. Like you're gonna do and say very shameful things. So that's why we need to, address this with the right tools. But unfortunately, the system doesn't understand, the neuroscience behind all of this, and they don't address it. And, it's part of the reason why I'm, you know, getting out there and speaking on it, like doing speaking engagements, because my goal is to, bring number one, my lived experience, which is the inspiration for everything I do. But number two, a part of my lived experience is my education and profession, right? And to get out there and to teach, at least from my experience and what I have found in the science and the research, right? Which I think there's a lot of credibility because it's literally why I recovered. So, in 2 to 3 months, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because as you were talking, I was going back to a question you had asked earlier, and I want to kind of, I'm gonna say, start steering in that direction too.
Mm.
But first, I have to know. Okay, I always ask, especially with the substance use professionals, right? And maybe you can convince me differently. Are you ready for the question? The
Yes,
big number
go for
one
it. There's
question.
nothing you can throw at me. I've been told that my message is dangerous for people. They use stronger words. So, yes, nothing you say to me is gonna throw me off kilter. Go ahead.
I love it. I love it. Is addiction a brain disease? And I'm going to let you know where my stance is before you answer that one. I take an existential approach, and what I have found since applying that clinically is that has been more effective in the helping people recover versus taking the brain disease approach. And the reason I say that is because every time, or most times than not, from the brain disease approach, I always get the idea, well, I get the brain, I understand that. Help me to get sober. Like that doesn't explain why this, that, and the third. It doesn't show my experience. I need to know things I can do, as you were just saying, to get sober. I'm tired of using that, and me understanding how the brain works isn't going to help me. So that's why I take an existential approach. But now I'm gonna let you have the floor.
Yeah, let's talk about it. This is actually like something I love to talk about. Let me ask you a question. When you say existential, what do you mean an existential approach?
Okay, do you know Viktor Frankl?
Yes, I do. I actually have his book up here. What is it called?
Yeah.
The Man's Search for Meaning?
Man's
Yeah.
Search for Meaning. Yep. So Viktor Frankl is one of the best theorists I have ever, and philosophers and psychologists I have ever read as far as the literature goes. I've read many other philosophers and theorists, but one of the things that stick out to me from existentialism is finding hope and meaning in experience
Mm, yeah.
and understanding the I'm not going to use the word why. I am, but I'm gonna use it lightly, but understanding that why.
Um, you use the word why.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yep.
Like, so like trying to understand why somebody has addiction. Is that what you mean?
Understanding why they do things, getting to the root cause.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. Trying to understand why. Yes. Well, I love that approach. So, okay. So you're kind of asking me, like, looking at alcoholism, alcohol dependency, addiction, whatever, from a dis-ease lens or just trying to understand why lens. That's what you're asking?
Yeah. Is
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And do you think it is a brain disease?
Hmm. Yeah. I actually don't think they're much different though, because I think the reason why is because it's a neurochemical disorder. Now, when you say why, usually it's like sort of like emotional or spiritual, like, oh, well, what, because the underlying sort of like thought process there is that somebody's drinking to cope with trauma, sort of, right? I look at alcohol, I call it dependency. I don't call it really alcoholism or alcohol addiction. I call it dependency. But I look at it just as if you were born with a hearing loss or if you were born with eyes that developed, um, that you need to wear a vision impairment, right? Or like a broken leg, right? Except in this case, we just have broken neurochemistry. Whether through genetics or misuse over time, it can also develop. You just developed a body that reacts much differently when alcohol is introduced into the system than people who don't have this issue. So I'm not talking about the people who maybe overdrink on occasion or whatever, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't have drank that much. No, I'm talking about the person who, when they start drinking alcohol, just them and the alcohol, no tools implemented, they won't stop until they drop passing out cold for the evening. Hello, that was me. Um, and who, whenever they try the traditional approach, which is typically sobriety, and it's typically through willpower. Whether we're going to AA, whether we're going to Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, we're going to therapy to try to work on trauma, it typically boils down to willpower. I'm not trying to discount all of the emotional and mental work, but at the end of the day, it is abstaining through willpower. Um, because yeah, the root cause is not mental health. It's neurochemistry and having a body that just reacts differently when alcohol is introduced into the system. And so, I always say because like I think it's the one of the biggest widely held misunderstandings that it's widely believed that people overdrink because of mental health or trauma or whatever. And my whole thing is just like, okay, I'm not so interested why somebody picks up alcohol, whether it's that initially or maybe it's networking events through corporate America or going to college parties or going out with your spouse for dinner and having, alcohol or whatever. I'm not as concerned with why somebody picks it up versus why there are folks who find that they can't put it down, because there are folks who turn to alcohol to cope with trauma. And some people get dependent on it and some others don't, right? And so it doesn't matter at the end of the day to me. Not that I don't care about them in terms of just looking at it from a factual lens and how to actually help the person. Um, so to sum it up, it's that you have a brain that unfortunately, with what happens in the body and how the body responds to the alcohol entering the system. To sum it up, you have a brain that just wires for alcohol dependency. Like there's a whole neurochemical process that goes on in somebody who has alcohol dependency's brain versus somebody who doesn't have alcohol dependency. And it's a very different process and it's very real because neural connections, right? This is coffee, but like picking up alcohol and drinking it. Again, this is coffee, not alcohol, but I'm not drinking while I'm on this podcast with you. Um, pick so neural pathways are, formed and then boom, what happens, inside the brain, a bunch of endorphins are pushed, as compared to somebody who doesn't have alcohol dependency. And endorphins are a very primitive chemical, indicates to you on a level you're not conscious of that you need alcohol to survive. And so your brain is basically getting signals that you need alcohol to survive. So picking up the drink, drinking, that neurochemical process going on, whatever fires together, wires together, boom. Now you have neural pathways built up that you need alcohol to survive. And then remember when you are developing dependency, you're going to get the strong and obsessive thoughts and cravings every day, right? 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 11:15 a.m. That was me, right? And so you're going to drink because it's the only thing that relieves them. Even if you're able to be sober for some time, you're eventually going to pick up alcohol, unfortunately. Um, and it's going to pick up right where it left off. It's called the alcohol deprivation effect. People falsely believe that if you are sober, that somehow you heal yourself of the alcohol addiction. You don't actually. You pick up right where you left off, or in fact, it might be actually worse. It's very dangerous, the traditional approach to alcohol addiction recovery. And the data points support that wholeheartedly. And it's not only dangerous for the person, but it's dangerous for the people around them, like innocent children or people who are driving on the roadways, or it's just so sad. So it's like, people tell me sometimes my message is going to like unalive people. They say it in a very much, meaner way. But no, it's like, no, actually, my message is going to save people. But we just need to open our minds to a different perspective because it saved my life and it saves the lives of people I work with every single day. But anyways, so you have a brain that basically just tells you that you need alcohol to survive. Well, I don't know if it's called a dis-ease or a disorder. I would call it a neurochemical disorder, right? But that's the why, behind it. It has nothing to do with emotions. Now, I believe that the emotional mental support, again, as I explained like earlier in the podcast, is really super important to do because if we don't address the shame and the trauma that comes along with trying to seek help in this system until we're able to get this message out to people at large and the system at large, I think we do have to incorporate the mental and emotional, side of this of navigating through the trauma and all the triggers, the childhood wounds that come up, like, for example, a core wound of um, when I seek help, nobody will listen to me or something, right? Like boy, does that get, triggered. Or I'm defective, right? That's another core wound that a lot of people can have depending on like your attachment style. And now we're getting into attachment theory. Okay. Anyways, and so, but that support is important. So I know I have a very different perspective on this than your average like person, but it's what the science supports. Not all the science, because a lot of the science is biased. That's what I found too. I remember I would be reading like in my during, earning my graduate degrees, and I'd be reading the research and I'm like, this study is already biased because it's literally listing out you know, um, the traditional alcohol recovery systems, like, way of thinking already boom in they're not coming to this with an open mind because they've always ever been told, this is what causes alcohol addiction and this is your only option, sobriety, right through willpower. And it's like these studies are biased already. Like, so, anyways, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question again. I'm sorry. I talk a lot. So that's why I always say, I'm not sure if I answered your question because once I get talking, like I just don't stop. So,
Yes, you did answer my question. And
okay.
so, two of the things I took away from it is it's I think it's a multifold approach, and part of that approach is understanding the neurochemical and the neurochemical process, understanding the meaning and hope of what that, or understanding the meaning of what the substance does to you, because every individual is different. And so, as you said in your as you were just talking, the reason this person drinks is going to be different than this person, and the reason this person drinks is going to be different than this person, and so on and so forth. And so, I think it really, you know, I think it is taking a multifaceted approach to recovery. And I love the fact that you said there's not a one size fits all approach here. And I'm sorry that you've been getting some pretty rough comments about your perspective on alcoholism and substance use and recovery. Um, I, as a substance use therapist, my job is to make sure that all approaches are used.
Yeah. That's
So
very
yeah,
good that
I
you
mean
say
that's kind.
that because I was just going to say it's very good that you say that because I was actually fired by my therapist of 5 years after I recovered. So remember that 2 to 3 month like that it took me to initially recover before that approach stopped working for me. That specific medication, I should say, rather. I was fired by her, not because I recovered, but because she didn't agree with my approach. So she did away with me after being my therapist for 5 years. So I just wanted to say it's very good that you have an open mind because it was very obviously, I mean, you could probably imagine as a therapist, like why that would be so, I don't want to say traumatizing, maybe traumatizing. I don't know. Just, you know what I
Well,
mean?
I think yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it is very very traumatizing, especially when you have people that want to discredit your approach.
Yeah. I think she was like more of the 12-step AA model. Um, and I think actually personally, I think that she had that issue and that's how she recovered. And so I find that a lot of the folks in my experience, maybe I just haven't experienced the more open minded folks, right? I don't want to overgeneralize. Um, and maybe it's like the people who do this are the ones to kind of speak out, right? So I don't want to overgeneralize, but I do find that typically the people who take, who have the strong rhetoric, did such a thing that she did, right? Are from the AA 12-step community. And I can understand and empathize with them why because I mean, I understand what it's like to have alcohol addiction and if you find something that's sort of working for you or maybe completely working for you in some cases, or if you think it's the only thing, um, I can understand why. Like you can't. even entertain anything else, because you'll fall off the wagon, right? And so I can understand why and I can empathize why. And it's just kind of so sad because it's just like, yeah, but there's another way that I don't want to discount it for you, but it might even be better for you, if you just opened your mind to it, but they can't because, again, it's traumatizing. See, I don't fault them because I understand the neurochemistry behind it. It's traumatizing to have alcohol addiction because if you don't get the right tools implemented, it is fatal, right? Or it's fatal for others around you. And then it still can take your life away because, you might do something that, eh, it's fatal to other people. So yeah, I really appreciate that you have that approach, that you're open-minded. So,
Well, I think it's important because to have that approach, and to take that open-minded stance because, well, from my clinical experience, what I have found is that what I do with this person, it might not fit for this person over here. So therefore I have to be more eclectic and utilize resources and tools that have been shown to work and be effective.
yes. I like the words you use. You're getting my brain to think, "Oh, wait, what does that word mean again?" So, I like the words you use. Eclectic. I haven't heard that one in a while.
Right. Yeah. So, all right, listen, coming down to the end of it. Okay.
Yes.
I want to know a couple of the three most important questions. All right. One is if somebody wanted to reach out to you, maybe for some services or maybe speaking engagements or something like that, how would they contact you?
Yeah, so crystalfedeli.com. It's just my name. It's with an E, F-E-D, not F-I-D. Some people spell it with F-I-D, like my PR person on my website, which messed with my SEO. Anyways, okay, you weren't asking all that. See that talking thing? I get to talking. So Crystal Fedeli, but I'm sure you'll like put up my name for people, you know. I won't spell it.
If there's one person watching, or if there's one thing you want people to take away from this recording or this episode, what would you hope that would be?
I would hope that if you got anything from all that I said, and I said a lot, but I always do, it's part of my charm. Um, I would just hope that you would understand that there's no reason to feel shame if you find yourself with alcohol dependency, because from a scientific perspective, it's not your fault. You were born with a body that reacts differently when alcohol is introduced into your system. And basically, to sum it up, you just have a brain that wires for alcohol dependency. God bless you. And there are evidence based tools that can totally undo the wiring that has already been done for dependency through the use of the alcohol, right? And that can prevent any more from wiring, any more neural connections wiring in the future, right? And there is support out there. And it sounds like you do that work, right? And, there's people like me, but there's other people too, right? And so don't shy away from seeking help from a new approach, as long as you come like open minded, because it might be the thing that like saves you. Because the data tells us it saves most people using evidence based approaches. But and I've also experienced it, and it literally gave me my life back. And I mean, I see people every day, right, who implement the tools. And yeah, there's people who will support you through that out there. But please don't feel shame. Don't feel shame. And like, you know, let this process of triggering, be a teacher to you. Like, if you use being triggered as a teacher, it will teach you the old wounds that you have inside of you, and you will be so powerful if you use your triggers as your teachers. Because if you use it to lead to the core wound, the core story, the core experience, and you heal from that after identifying it, you are so powerful. And literally, you could be a person who is literally triggered by nothing eventually, or what to do. So yeah, but don't feel shame. Don't feel shame. Don't feel shame. That was a long thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, no. And what is your call to action?
Okay. So if you want to work with me, so I am not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I certainly work with therapists and doctors when it is needed, right? What I am is I am a researcher, right? So my master's is in research and analysis, the other one is in basically advocacy. You could say policy and advocacy. They're long degrees, so I won't name them all, but I function as a researcher, right? I function as a speaker and I function as a recovery mentor. And I created the shame free recovery method, which is an approach to recovery that is rooted in being absolutely shame free. And it's rooted in science because we have to use a scientific approach. We can't just use an approach based off of opinion, right? And then it's also rooted in soul. Again, we're doing the emotional work as we work through this process. I personally function as a mentor. So that is my scope of practice. So I'm going to teach you what the root cause is from the research. If you want citations, I'll give them to you too. And I will teach you all of the evidence based tools. And there are so many different subtypes, different ways to use the subtypes. And then we will get you connected with those resources with specific professionals. And it depends because it's not a one size fits all. And it also depends on your goals, right? But uh, that's what I am. Like, I know the system like the back of my hand, and I made a lot of connections, and I'm an advocate, right? And then I mentor you and I walk you through the entire process from where you are to where you want to be if you want to come along for the ride, right? And so the call to action first is to go check out the shame free recovery method at my website, crystalfedeli.com, and to learn about the method a little bit more than what I just explained, because I would want you to understand, what you would be investing your time and finances, et cetera, into, right? And then the second step is to book a breakthrough session where we talk about everything I just talked about, right? And we create your personalized recovery plan from where you are to where you want to be. If you implement this plan, you will get there, but also there's an option if you want me to walk, with you for there's different periods of time. But so that's the call to action to really just learn more about the shame-free recovery method. Or of course, if you're like, you know what, Crystal, enough said, I'm game, breakthrough session. So recovery breakthrough session.
I love it. I love it. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode down on the One Moment podcast. Again, breaking stigmas, breaking barriers, breaking everything that we can potentially break as it relates to what we have been talking about and much more. So thank you, Miss Crystal.